Hey guys, today I'm playing Besiege, which I'm trying out for the first time in this video. I wanted to start off making a car, but I also wanted to do something unique with it. I decided to attempt to make a differential, which both seemed like a good fit for the game and also a good challenge. So now I'm in the sandbox, and the first thing I have here is that starting block. Now I didn't quite know where I wanted to go with this, so I just added in a few pieces and made a basic frame for a car. So adding in two wheels in the back. Now I'm starting with the gears in the front, and this is actually what's going to make up the differential. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a differential is, the whole idea is that it enables you to apply power to two wheels while also rotating them at different speeds. That might sound strange, but it's important for turning, where one wheel has to rotate a further distance than the other. I'll have a comparison towards the end showing why and how this helps. Usually they're used in rear-wheel drive cars. So I have those two legs I put in the front to support this whole gear system up. And now, one of the gears I changed to a power gear so I can control it. And you can see I can spin the gear train and how that sort of moves. Now this isn't actually how I'm going to be powering this system of gears, but it does show how they mesh with each other. So I'm just replacing the back two wheels with, well, two framing pieces to hold it up, and works the same way. Now it's time to start on the actual mechanism. So I had to rotate the gears 90 degrees, so instead of being flat, they're sort of up a bit. And the two gears on the outside are being turned into the ones that actually have the wheels attached to them. So I add in those two long pieces of wood, and then I have two wheels at the end. Now, right now it just falls apart, but there's a few more things I need to do. And the two gears in the top and the bottom, they're going to be rotating around the other two gears. The idea is that they're going to be actually not spinning. The hope is that for most of the time, they're just rotating around, and the teeth are directly pushing the teeth of the other gears, moving them. But when you're turning, now the gears in the middle are allowed to rotate, and this is what enables them to spin at different speeds. And now if you give it a quick test, it still sort of just falls apart. And this is because the two gears with the wheels on them, they need to be attached together so that they're allowed to freely rotate, but they're forced to stay on the same line. So I tried doing that with that single piece of wood, and it was working. It was holding them together, but it was also holding the top and the bottom gears in place, and that I don't want. I want the top and the bottom gears to be able to rotate around freely. So I'm using a bracing piece instead, and the braces can attach two pieces together, but they aren't going to attach the top and the bottom gear. So that's good. But you'll notice another problem I have is that the center axle and the wheel are allowed to rotate independently of the gear. And that I don't want. I want the gear and the wheel to rotate with each other so that the gear is directly driving the wheels. So after adding in a lot of bracing pieces to hold everything together a bit more, you can see as I let it go, nothing much happens, but that's okay, because nothing really should be rotating, there's no power source yet. So I'm increasing the size of the wheels so that it looks a bit more believable, and now everything was pretty good, so I decided to delete everything. Alright, that's not actually what's happening here. What I'm really doing is just replacing all the small gears with a bigger gear, like a bigger gear in the game. And this A just makes it easier for me to track what's happening, and B is going to make it easier for you guys to see what's happening. Now the only big change I guess I made was instead of having gears on the top and bottom of the two gears that the wheels are attached to, they're going to be on the sides. And this was also just to make it easier to see what was happening. So after doing that, everything's still the same, except these bigger gears have a small issue where they sort of just clip into each other slightly. Now, when I go into the editor, it fixes the problem, but it puts a lot of torque on the car, and I didn't really think this was going to be awesome. So my solution is just to start those gears off slightly rotated. But now as I load in, you can see how the two gears in the back and the front sort of slip out of the other gears. They sort of rotate sideways and fall through the mechanism. Now this is actually something I was expecting, and all I need to do for this is have some sort of swivel joint on the axle that allows that square piece to rotate independently of the axles themselves though, and for that I need a swivel joint. Now the idea of the swivel joint is that it attaches things so that everything stays in the same line, it mechanically connects it like that, but anything attached to the swivel joint is allowed to rotate independently of the axis it's on. So by attaching it, you can see now it can't fall off because it's held on like linearly, but it's still allowed to rotate around the axle. And now everything seemed pretty good, and the next thing I just wanted to do is make the wheels a little bit bigger because it was getting a little close to the ground. And also I'm adding in a cannon, well actually 4 cannons. Now the cannons are going to be my power source for, well, temporary power source. The cannons work well because as they recoil, they rotate that center piece, and that's how you drive the differential. You want to rotate that center block I have. Here I'm reinforcing it a bit because the cannons had a habit of making everything explode. But as they shoot, it rotates that center piece around and the thing starts moving. Now, this I realized there's a small problem on. You can see in the slow motion, the top gear and the bottom gear are still rotating at the same speed together. Now this shouldn't be happening. The reason is that top gear isn't on the ground at all, and the bottom one is. So the top gear should be spinning much faster since it has almost no load on it since it's just in the air, while the bottom gear has to rotate against the ground. Now, that's the entire idea of the differential, is that it puts an even amount of power on the wheels. so it would have to spin the top gear much faster to have the same load. So to fix this problem, I needed to add in another swivel joint. The problem before is that the swivel joint was allowing one side to rotate freely, but the other side was still locked onto it. What I needed is two swivel joints facing into each other, with a block in the middle, and this way the center block's allowed to rotate independently of everything that's happening, but the two outside pieces of the swivel joint are going to be locked together since I want the gear to directly drive the wheel. This is definitely a lot of spinning and it's getting very confusing. This is all I need to do. So after getting everything in place where I wanted it, it was time to brace like literally everything. So again, the idea of bracing all this stuff is to attach the gear directly to the wheel so that the gear is driving the wheel directly. I don't want the wheel to be spinning freely. So after doing all that bracing, you see that center piece is still allowed to rotate freely as if it's not attached to anything. And then the differential is going to be based off of that piece, so it's allowed to rotate independently of both of the wheels. So I'm just redesigning the framing setup so that it's based off of that point. And now if I give it a quick test, you can see it seems to be working. It's a little hard to tell, and also I didn't do the other side because I forgot to put it in symmetry mode. But after doing that, you can see it rotates around, and it's the same sort of two-wheeled disaster as before, but this time it behaves a bit better. So as a quick test to show that this is working, you can see as both of the wheels are on the ground and have the same load, the gears that are not attached to the wheels at all are just rotating around but aren't rotating themselves. They're just rotating around the axle. And this is right because the wheels are spinning at about the same speed. But here I accidentally managed to get it on one wheel, and you can see that completely changes. Now if you look at the gear setup in the middle, you can see how those gears are rotating not only around the axle, but they're also rotating themselves, which allows the top wheel to spin faster than the bottom wheel. In this case, it's spinning twice as fast. And this is the whole idea of the differential. I mean, not exactly this. The wheel isn't going to be like off the ground, but it's going to have a different speed on it. And by those two gears rotating themselves, as well as rotating around the axle, they can apply power while also allowing the wheels to spin at different speeds. So here I deleted one of the wheels, and I don't know what I was expecting, but it was kind of funny, so I left it in. And now I have to do my second to last change to the axle setup. Now I need to add in another one of these double swivel joint things, and this one is going to be attached to the rest of the frame of the car. Because I don't want the frame of the car to be rotating with the differential, and I don't also want it to be rotating with one of the wheels. I want it to be rotating freely. So to do that, I have two of these swivel joints put into each other, and now if I make the wheels big again, you can see as I let it go, it works. It sags a bit because it's not really being held up by anything. Once I add in the other wheels, it should behave a bit better. But I have to once again brace the gear directly to the wheel so that the gear is directly driving the wheel. And I'm doing that with two sets of braces. Now if I give it a quick test, you can see it holds itself up and it seems to work. But now I can add in these two long rod things. And this is going to be the frame of the car. So if I add in two wheels to the front and then make them bigger, because they kind of look really small now, if I let it go, it sort of falls apart. But I can use some more braces to hold it all together. And after doing that, holds itself up pretty well. And everything seems to be good, except the differential now isn't really driving the wheels as well. And this is sort of a problem I was expecting, in that basically the gears are skipping along the other gears, the gears that have the wheels on them, since the load has increased a lot now. So I did two things to fix this problem. I only showed the one here, and that's making the gear a bit bigger. The other thing I did was put the gears closer together so that they have to mesh better, and this allows them to spin a bit better and not skip, or at least it helps them not skip as much. So now is actually the last thing I have to do to the axle. There's just so many things in this axle by now. And this is adding in a gear to drive the differential. Now, the driving mechanism for this is again to spin that center block that I have. So to do that, I have this gear on the side, and it's directly attached to the center block. And I'm going to make it a bit bigger, but I'm going to have some sort of gear train in the middle that's going to be able to spin that gear, which spins that center block and therefore moves the car. So now the gear is a bit bigger, and it's time for me to add in another gear into the middle that can drive that gear and spin the whole car. So I quickly made a couple beams just to base the gear off of. So I can put that down there, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And now you can see how it meshes with that big gear, and as it spins, it moves the car. I had a small problem where it was rubbing against the gear, and to solve that, I made it bigger and also pushed it back a bit. And now everything seems to work pretty well. Only problem is it's rotating left, which isn't supposed to be happening. And the problem was actually something easy enough to fix. I just forgot to use bracing pieces to attach the gear to the wheel on the left side. So after putting those 4 bracing pieces in here, I can now give it a quick test. And it seems to work. It's driving you forwards and everything seems to be good. So as proof that this thing is actually like diverting power properly, I could prop up one of the wheels, and you can see as I spin it up, how only one wheel spins and the other one doesn't even attempt to spin. And this is proof that it's actually able to have different speeds in both of the wheels while also driving them. So Got rid of those front wheels, but only temporarily, because I want to add in steering, and this is the whole idea of the differential, the entire idea of making this entire thing, is that I'm able to rotate the one wheel at a different speed than the other one while turning. So I put in those, and it kind of seems to be working, but I have no real way of proving that, because it doesn't really have a good turning radius, because I didn't extend them out far enough, and the wheels were rubbing against the frame of the car. So to fix that, I just added basically framing extensions, so now they can rotate a further distance, and I can have an actual decent turning radius. So I'm giving it a quick test, and again, all seems to be working well, but I have really no way of actually proving that it's working, besides the fact that it seems to be working. So I decided to actually put it up to a test, and to do that, I'm linking the wheels directly together. And this basically just bypasses the entire differential, forces the wheels to be driven at the same speed since they're directly tied together. And now if I try to turn, you can see how the front wheels are really skipping and it's not really turning that much. So now if I remove those rods, you can see now it turns much better, and that's because the left rear wheel is allowed to rotate at a different speed than the right rear wheel, while they both still are getting power. So finally I added in a few last modifications. Basically all I did was, well, I'm going to say all I did, I guess there's a few things I did. I just replaced the driving gear with this vacuum engine mechanism. I was going to show it, but didn't really apply to the rest of the video, and it was more just kind of fun than anything else. So guys, thanks for watching. Definitely happy with the way this turned out. I'm glad I actually achieved what I wanted to do. And then the vacuum powered engine at the end was just sort of for fun. The footage you see here is just me driving that around. It was painfully slow, and even sped up here you can see how bad it was. So that's also a reason I didn't include it. But if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask below, and otherwise until next time.